A bill titled Robert E. Lee Monument Removal Act was introduced by Maryland Representative David J. Trone on December 28, 2024. This bill calls for the removal of the Robert E. Lee Monument from the Antietam National Battlefield in North Carolina. The monument is to be destroyed, sold for raw materials, and the proceeds used to pay for the destruction of said monument. These materials will not be considered assets, meaning they don't get to claim the value of the material once the monument is destroyed. While this bill calls for the destruction of a monument, it also requires the Secretary of the National Park Service to restore the park in a way that protects the Antietam National Battlefield and the interpretation of the battle itself. The Secretary of the National Park Services will have 1 year after the bill is passed to develop a plan for removal and restoration of the park. Instead of providing impacts, as there will really only be personal impacts to individuals, I would like to provide two perspectives on this action that contain as little bias as possible, while still capturing as wide of a range of logical thinking applied to emotional issues. They will be titled Perspectives A and B for separation's sake. This is not to indicate which is more valid, only that they are different. I understand not everyone will agree with anything I have to say, from either perspective. That is good. It is important for us to have our own thoughts and ideas, but we must be able to express these ideas freely with each other. This includes presenting your opinions and ways of thinking to others in a respectful manner. Please let me, and others that watch this video, know in the comments below what you feel on this topic, and if you agree or disagree with myself or any other commenter. Just keep the respect alive on both ends. Perspective A. The historical impact the American Civil War had on American history is impossible to overstate. Much of the systemic racism that is perceived today is due to the whole driving force behind the war in the first place, and historical monuments like the Confederate General Robert E. Lee statue, here discussed in the bill, stand as testimony to many things: the principles that were held by slave owners, the lengths that were taken to keep a way of life that was seen as acceptable during that time period and beyond. And for many today, its everlasting effects on a whole demographic of Americans. Still feeling the impacts. It is important to understand what exactly the symbols we raise as heroes, villains, or legends in general, stood for, and to only accept those that align with good sense and equality among the citizens. Regardless of the personal philosophy he held on slavery, as stated in some texts about him, Robert E. Lee was a leading general of the Confederate Army during the American Civil War. I will not say that this made him an evil person. I don't know enough of the actions he took in his life. I can only make judgment on the actions known to me through accurate historical documentation. Perspective B. History has the unique ability to hold the mirror up to the present and really make those of us living in the present understand how wonderfully right, and how utterly wrong, things can turn out. Erasing history, both good and bad, provides a false perspective that those things did not happen, which takes away our ability to learn from them. To stay within guidelines for posting videos, since the appeal process is a pain, imagine that the plague that ravaged Europe was erased from history because the way the medical field at the time handled it was deemed inappropriate and ineffective, which it certainly was. If we were stripped of the ability to know how an epidemic like this was caused, spread, and managed, we would suffer much the same fate every time another disaster of this magnitude arose. We do not have to glorify those that caused more harm, but we should not banish those that made leaps in the direction of moral, practical, and historical advancement. Erasing our own past is a trend that becomes easier with time. I am not claiming to have the correct answer to the question of removing this monument. It is not up to me to decide either way. I am only one of the millions of Americans that have the voice to take their own stance. Take your stand on the side you have faith in. But keep the respect for your fellow American alive.